China.
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 In The Art of War, ancient Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu wrote that the key to victory is striking where your enemy is weakest. 2.5 millennia later, his words are playing out in a high-stakes economic battle between the world's greatest powers. When China announced sweeping new export controls on rare earth minerals this month, it wasn't just another shot in the ongoing trade war. It was a precision strike at America's technological Achilles heel. The new rules require Beijing's explicit approval for any product containing even trace amounts, just 0.1%, of Chinese rare earth materials. This seemingly small threshold sent shockwaves through Washington and corporate America. Why such panic over these obscure elements? Because rare earth minerals are quite literally the foundation of modern civilization. They're essential for everything from the magnets in electric vehicles to the guidance systems in advanced fighter jets, from the chips in your smartphone to the targeting sensors in precision missiles. And China's dominance of this crucial supply chain is nearly absolute, controlling 70% of global mining, 90% of processing, and a staggering 93% of magnet manufacturing. This vulnerability didn't happen by accident. For over a decade, Chinese President Xi Jinping has methodically executed a strategy to make China indispensable to global supply chains. In 2015, he launched the Made in China 2025 initiative aimed at dominating frontier industries like robotics, batteries, and artificial intelligence. 5 years later, he privately told senior party officials that making the world dependent on Chinese manufacturing would create a powerful deterrent against foreign pressure. China's strategy runs far deeper than most Western observers realize, says Dr. Marie Chen, director of the Global Supply Chain Institute. This isn't just about controlling raw materials. It's about building complete, industrial ecosystems that are nearly impossible to replicate elsewhere. From specialized education and workforce training to power infrastructure and vertical integration, China has spent decades creating advantages that can't be overcome with simple policy changes or subsidies. Take gallium, for instance, a soft metal crucial for semiconductors and military radar systems. China controls 98% of global production. Building even a fraction of that capacity elsewhere would require over $140 billion in investments, 6 new nuclear reactors, tens of thousands of skilled workers, and decades of planning. And that's just one of 21 critical elements now under Chinese export controls. While the U.S. government has been loudly threatening tariffs and trade restrictions, China has been quietly strengthening its position. As noted, China analyst Sean Ryan explains, the Chinese haven't just been reacting, they've been systematically reducing their dependence on American products. They've invested hundreds of billions in domestic semiconductor production instead of buying from Nvidia and Intel. They've shifted soybean purchases from the US to Brazil and Argentina. They've redirected oil purchases from America to Canada. Apart from ethane, virtually anything America produces, China can now source elsewhere. This strategic disparity is perhaps most visible in the artificial intelligence sector. Jensen Huang, CEO of Nvidia, the world's most valuable company at $4 trillion, recently revealed a stark reality. We went from 95% market share in China to 0. I can't imagine any policymaker thinking it's a good idea for America to completely lose one of the largest markets in the world. The implications for the global AI race are profound. With 50% of the world's AI researchers and 30% of the global tech market, China's domestic capabilities are accelerating. As Huang warns, if your ultimate goal is for America to win the AI race, giving up 30% of the world's market from the start and preventing American technologies from proliferating globally means we're essentially isolating American technology and conceding the rest of the world to everyone else. This miscalculation extends beyond just AI. A recent Harvard University study comparing export complexities between the US and China revealed an uncomfortable truth. China now exports many advanced technologies that would be extremely difficult for America to source elsewhere. Meanwhile, most US exports to China have ready substitutes from other countries. The US government's approach shows a fundamental misunderstanding of modern supply chain dynamics, explains Dr. Thomas Williams, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute. You can't contain a country that has systematically positioned itself at the center of global manufacturing. When you try, you often end up hurting yourself more than your intended target. This reality was driven home when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's public criticism of Chinese officials backfired, prompting a calm but pointed response from Beijing. China's stance is consistent. We do not want a tariff war, but we are not afraid of one. The message was clear. China had prepared for this confrontation while America had not. The consequences of this strategic imbalance are now becoming painfully clear. In October 2025, when China announced its latest round of export restrictions, global markets experienced their sharpest single-day decline since the 2023 banking crisis. The S&P 500 dropped 8.3% as investors grappled with the implications of China's move.
But the market reaction was just the tip of the iceberg. What truly terrified Western policymakers was China's demonstration of its ability to weaponize interdependence without significantly harming its own economy. As former White House economic advisor Sarah McKinnon notes, we're seeing the results of asymmetric preparation. While America focused on short-term tactical moves, China spent years building strategic resilience.
The numbers tell a sobering story. When Trump announced his planned 100% tariff on Chinese goods, Beijing responded not with matching tariffs, but by quietly shifting its rare earth exports to friendly nations. Within weeks, American manufacturers found themselves paying 300 to 400% premiums to source these materials through third countries, while Chinese companies continued business as usual with alternative partners.
This dynamic was perfectly illustrated in the electric vehicle sector. Tesla's Shanghai Gigafactory continued producing cars at full capacity using domestic rare earth supplies, while its Austin plant struggled with periodic shutdowns due to magnet shortages. As industry analyst Michael Zhang observes, the irony is striking. American companies operating in China have better access to critical materials than those manufacturing in the United States.
The diplomatic fallout has been equally significant. Traditional U.S. allies, faced with choosing between maintaining access to Chinese rare earths or supporting American trade policies, have increasingly opted for pragmatic engagement with Beijing. Japan, despite its historical tensions with China, recently signed a comprehensive rare earth trading agreement, securing preferential access for its automotive and electronics industries.
What we're witnessing is the limit of American economic leverage, explains Dr. Rebecca Martinez, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. When you can't offer viable alternatives to Chinese supply chains, even your closest allies will prioritize their economic survival over geopolitical solidarity.
The technology sector has been particularly hard hit. American chip designers like AMD and Intel have seen their Asian manufacturing partners struggle to maintain production due to gallium shortages. Meanwhile, Chinese domestic chip manufacturers like SMIC have ramped up production, benefiting from unrestricted access to these critical materials.
This technological divergence is accelerating. Recent satellite imagery shows massive new rare earth processing facilities under construction across China's interior provinces. According to Dr. James Wilson, a leading expert in mineral economics, China isn't just maintaining its advantage, it's actively expanding it. They're building processing capacity that would take the West decades and trillions of dollars to match.
The human cost of this strategic miscalculation is mounting. In Michigan alone, over 30,000 automotive workers have been temporarily laid off due to supply chain disruptions. Similar scenes are playing out across America's industrial heartland, from Ohio to Texas. As United Auto Workers President Mike Thompson puts it, we're watching decades of manufacturing expertise slip away because our leaders didn't take China's warnings seriously.
Perhaps most concerning is China's growing influence over emerging technologies. With control over critical materials for everything from quantum computers to advanced batteries, Beijing is increasingly setting the pace of global innovation. Chinese research institutions now lead in patent filings for next-generation materials science, while American labs struggle to secure stable supplies for basic research.
The next decade of technological development will be shaped by access to these materials, warns Dr. Lisa Chen, director of the MIT Materials Science Laboratory. Without reliable access to rare earths and similar critical elements, Western innovation will increasingly happen at China's discretion.
Some American policymakers are finally acknowledging the depth of this challenge. Recent classified Pentagon assessments, partially leaked to the press, conclude that China's control over critical materials poses a greater threat to U.S. military readiness than any conventional military capability. The report estimates it would take at least 15 years and over $500 billion in investments to create alternative supply chains, assuming such an effort started immediately.
Yet even as this reality sets in, China continues to strengthen its position. Recent geological surveys have identified major new rare earth deposits in Chinese-controlled territories, while Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative has secured preferential access to discoveries in Africa and South America. As one senior Chinese official recently remarked, with characteristic understatement, "We are confident in our ability to maintain market stability through any disruptions."
In a shocking turn of events, U.S. sanctions aimed at containing China's nuclear power industry have spectacularly backfired, launching China into a position of global dominance in one of humanity's most crucial future technologies. The stakes couldn't be higher. We're witnessing a nuclear renaissance that mirrors the intensity of the 1960s space race, but this time, China is leaving America in the dust. The numbers tell a staggering story. While the United States Department of Energy announced ambitious plans to triple nuclear capacity by 2050, China has already approved roughly 10 new reactors every year since 2022. At this blistering pace, China is set to dethrone America as the world's largest nuclear power producer by 2030, a remarkable achievement considering they broke ground on their first reactor nearly 40 years after the U.S. pioneered the technology. The story of how we got here reads like a masterclass in unintended consequences. 7 years ago, the U.S. government, citing the ever-present specter of national security risks, imposed strict sanctions on China's nuclear power sector. It's a familiar tune we've heard time and again. From TikTok to electric vehicles, even down to Chinese-made cargo cranes at American ports being labeled as potential threats. The paranoia has reached such absurd levels that some analysts have suggested Chinese kitchen air fryers might be sending cooking data back to Beijing. But here's where things get interesting, and where America's strategic miscalculation becomes clear. Nuclear energy isn't just another industry. It's a complex, interconnected global endeavor that thrives on collaboration. Yet, that's exactly what U.S. sanctions forced China to do, and the results have been remarkable. Despite being cut off from American technology and expertise, China has emerged stronger than ever. A recent industry analysis reveals that the United States now lags a stunning 15 years behind China in nuclear power development. The numbers support this analysis. Of the 10 most recent nuclear power projects to begin construction since last July, 7 belong to China. The remaining 3 are split between Russia, South Korea, and Pakistan. This dominance isn't just about quantity, it's about capability and independence. Take the recently completed Fueling 5 unit in China's southeastern Fujian province. This cutting-edge facility involved more than 5,300 domestic suppliers, with all core equipment produced in-house. More importantly, the project served as a training ground for thousands of Chinese professionals in advanced nuclear technologies, building a knowledge base that will fuel future developments. China's nuclear ascendance fits into a broader pattern of clean energy dominance that should worry Western policymakers. The country already controls 70% of the global electric vehicle market, 75% of lithium-ion battery production, 65% of wind turbine manufacturing, and an overwhelming 82% of solar panel production. Just recently, China announced plans for the world's largest hydroelectric dam through the Tibetan Mountains, a single project that will generate enough power to run the entire United Kingdom. Meanwhile, traditional nuclear powerhouses like the United States and France have seen their domestic programs stagnate. Public opposition, soaring costs, and regulatory hurdles have brought new construction to a virtual standstill. The consequences are severe. Supply chains have withered, skilled workers have left the industry, and the capability to build new plants efficiently has largely disappeared. This summer, the Director General of the World Nuclear Association visited Chinese nuclear facilities and was left speechless. "I couldn't close my mouth in amazement," she reported, stunned by the advanced capabilities and industrial scale of China's program. The country has already begun exporting its expertise, with at least 15 nuclear power units and research facilities sold worldwide, including the Karachi nuclear power plant in Pakistan, China's first overseas deployment of its homegrown technology. But this remarkable success story also carries profound implications for global security and the future of international cooperation. The nuclear industry has always been inextricably linked with geopolitical power, and China's rapid ascent has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. These concerns have become particularly acute as nuclear arms control talks between the United States, Russia, and China have ground to a halt. The new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty is set to expire in February 2026, and efforts to bring China to the negotiating table have failed spectacularly. Yet the numbers tell a different story. China's nuclear arsenal has grown significantly, expanding from approximately 500 warheads in early 2024 to about 600 by January 2025. The implications extend far beyond military considerations. China's nuclear expertise has become a powerful tool of diplomatic influence, particularly in developing nations eager to establish their own nuclear power programs. The Karachi nuclear power plant in Pakistan serves as a prime example, a showcase of Chinese technology that has opened doors across Asia, Africa, and South America. This influence is particularly visible in the ongoing global energy transition. As nations race to decarbonize their economies, China's comprehensive command of clean energy technologies puts it in an unprecedented position of strength. Beyond nuclear power, their dominance extends across the entire spectrum of renewable energy. 70% of global electric vehicle production, 75% of lithium-ion batteries, 65% of wind turbines, and an astounding 82% of solar panels. The latest demonstration of this technological prowess came with the announcement of the world's largest hydroelectric dam project in Tibet, a single facility that will generate more electricity than all of Britain's power plants combined. The situation has become particularly concerning for traditional nuclear powers like France and the United States, where domestic programs have atrophied. This reality was driven home when a delegation of American nuclear executives visited China's Fueling 5 facility last month. What they witnessed was a level of industrial coordination that one participant described as humbling. The project, completed ahead of schedule and under budget, involved more than 5,300 domestic suppliers working in perfect synchronization, with every critical component manufactured within China's borders. The urgency of climate change adds another layer of complexity to this shifting landscape. The International Energy Agency estimates that global nuclear power capacity needs to double by 2050 to meet climate goals. With China now controlling the world's most advanced and cost-effective nuclear technology, Western nations face an uncomfortable choice: partner with Chinese manufacturers or risk missing crucial climate targets. The repercussions of this dilemma are already visible. Several European countries have quietly begun exploring partnerships with Chinese nuclear firms, despite strong opposition from Washington. As nations race to decarbonize their economies and meet critical climate targets, the uncomfortable truth becomes clear. China's dominance in nuclear technology and clean energy infrastructure has fundamentally altered the global strategic landscape. What began as an attempt to contain China's nuclear ambitions has instead created a new world order where the West must choose between geopolitical posturing and climate survival. A choice that may have already been made for them. 50% tariffs. That's the crushing blow former President Trump just dealt to dozens of nations across the globe. In what experts are calling the most aggressive trade action in modern history, no country was spared. Not Japan, not Germany, not even America's closest allies. But while the United States builds walls, China is opening doors in a way that's rapidly reshaping the global economic landscape. In a calculated countermove that stunned international observers, Beijing announced complete tariff exemptions for 53 friendly nations, primarily in Africa. The contrast couldn't be more striking. American barriers versus Chinese bridges, with billions in trade hanging in the balance. The impact was immediate and devastating. U.S. manufacturing, already struggling, plunged into its worst performance in nearly 4 years. The manufacturing index fell below 50% for 4 straight months, a clear signal of contraction in a sector that still makes up over 10% of America's economy. Meanwhile, China-Africa trade exploded to $160 billion, setting new records with a 14.4% surge that left economists scrambling to update their forecasts. To understand how we got here, we need to look back at America's industrial decline. After World War II, the United States was the undisputed manufacturing king. U.S. factories could build aircraft carriers faster than they could be sunk in battle. American assembly lines churned out more than 80% of the world's vehicles. We were, quite literally, the arsenal of democracy. Today, that industrial might has largely evaporated. U.S. civilian shipbuilding now accounts for a mere 0.1% of the global market, while China dominates with over 70%. The automotive sector tells an equally stark story. By 2024, China had decisively overtaken the United States in both production and sales, manufacturing over 30 million vehicles annually, while selling 18 million in their domestic market alone. Enter Trump's aggressive tariff strategy. In early July, he launched 4 consecutive rounds of tariff notices targeting 51 countries, hiking rates from 25% to 50%. But the real bombshell dropped on July 31st, when he signed an executive order implementing uniform reciprocal tariffs on virtually every nation on Earth. The details sent shockwaves through global markets. Most countries face tariffs between 10% and 15%. Syria topped the list at 41%, followed by Laos and Myanmar at 40%. Even America's closest allies felt the sting. Japan, South Korea, and the entire European Union were hit with 15% tariffs. Mexico, despite its crucial role in North American supply chains, faced similar rates. African nations were particularly hard hit. In April 2025, Trump targeted 51 African countries with tariffs ranging from 10% to 50%. The nation of Lesotho faced the maximum 50% rate, effectively cutting it off from the U.S. market. Trump's justification was simple and brutal. Any nation that hadn't explicitly declared its support for American policies would face minimum 10% tariffs across the board. But while Trump built barriers, China saw opportunity. As the U.S. pushed African nations away, Beijing welcomed them with open arms. China's zero-tariff policy for 53 African nations wasn't just about trade, it was about securing the resources crucial for tomorrow's technology. Africa holds 90% of the world's cobalt reserves, 75% of its platinum, and 50% of its manganese. Critical materials for the booming electric vehicle industry. Through its zero-tariff policy, China gained preferential access to these vital resources. Today, cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo, lithium from Namibia, and copper from Angola flow steadily to Chinese factories through Beijing-funded ports and railways. The results were immediate and dramatic. Shanghai ports reported a staggering 129.5% year-over-year increase in African coffee bean imports. Chinese e-commerce platforms sold 10 tons of Tanzanian honey in just 3 days. In Kenya, a joint venture television factory employed over 1,000 African workers, producing sets that proudly displayed Chinese technology plus African assembly. The legal battle over Trump's tariffs has only added to the uncertainty. In September 2025, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit dealt a significant blow to his strategy. In a 7-4 decision, the court found that Trump had overstepped his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act when implementing his sweeping tariffs. But with the stay in place until mid-October and an inevitable Supreme Court appeal looming, the market uncertainty continues. Meanwhile, the consequences for American manufacturing grow more severe by the day. Supply chain disruptions are forcing extended production cycles, while factories face the double burden of rising inventories and falling orders. Inside the halls of the Supreme Court, the battle over Trump's tariffs reached a fever pitch. Chief Justice Roberts posed a pointed question that cut to the heart of the matter. Does the International Emergency Economic Powers Act truly grant the executive branch such sweeping authority over global trade? The answer would determine the fate of the most extensive tariff program in modern history. Meanwhile, China's strategic courting of Africa continued to bear fruit. A landmark deal announced in September saw Beijing commit to building a $2.1 billion green technology manufacturing hub in Tanzania. The contrast in approaches became even more stark when Brazil faced Trump's wrath. After refusing to distance itself from former President Jair Bolsonaro, the country was slapped with emergency tariffs reaching 50%. The impact on American companies was severe. Major agricultural equipment manufacturers saw their South American market share plummet as Chinese competitors stepped in to fill the void. India faced similar treatment, with secondary tariffs pushing the total rate to 50%. Punishment for maintaining trade relations with Russia. The automotive sector tells the story in stark numbers. While American giants like GM and Ford struggle with annual sales of 6 million and 4.47 million units respectively, Chinese manufacturers are setting new records. Tesla stands alone as the only American brand among the top 3 global EV makers, while Chinese factories churn out over 30 million vehicles annually. But perhaps most concerning is the impact on America's technological future. As U.S. manufacturers grapple with extended production cycles and falling orders, China is securing the raw materials that will power tomorrow's innovations. Through its zero-tariff policy with Africa, Beijing has preferential access to 90% of the world's cobalt, 75% of its platinum, and 50% of its manganese, the critical minerals needed for everything from electric vehicles to advanced electronics. The impacts are already visible in unexpected places. Shanghai's ports reported a stunning 129.5% surge in African coffee bean imports. Chinese e-commerce platforms moved 10 tons of Tanzanian honey in just 3 days. These aren't just statistics. They represent real shifts in global trade flows that may prove impossible to reverse. Even attempts at compromise have fallen short. A July deal between the US and EU saw Europe commit to $750 billion in energy purchases and $600 billion in investments. Yet, America maintained its 15% tariff rate on European exports, straining one of its most crucial economic partnerships. A brief 90-day truce with China in May offered a glimmer of hope, with both sides reducing their tariffs significantly. U.S. rates dropped from 145% to around 30%, while Chinese duties fell from approximately 10%. But the temporary easing failed to address the fundamental tensions driving the trade war. The human cost is mounting. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported slowing job growth in August, a direct result of trade policy uncertainty. When Trump dismissed this data as rigged and fired the BLS commissioner, it only added to the market instability. In Africa, the story is different. A joint venture television factory in Kenya now employs over 1,000 local workers. combining Chinese technology with African assembly expertise. It's a model that emphasizes sustainable partnership over exploitation, and it's winning hearts and minds across the continent. The Supreme Court's upcoming decision in October looms large over this shifting landscape. But regardless of the legal outcome, the global economic realignment is already well underway. China's bridge-building diplomacy stands in stark contrast to America's retreat behind tariff walls, and the consequences may reshape international commerce for generations to come.
China. 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 China.
In a move that sent shockwaves through Washington, China has just delivered what many are calling a knockout punch to America's semiconductor industry. Beijing has ordered every Chinese company to immediately stop purchasing American-made chips, effectively cutting off U.S. tech giants from the world's largest market overnight. This isn't just another trade dispute, it's a defining moment that could permanently reshape the global technology landscape. The impact was immediate and devastating. Nvidia, America's AI chip powerhouse, watched billions in potential revenue evaporate as Chinese firms canceled orders for their newest H20 processor. AMD, another semiconductor giant, faced the same fate as purchase agreements were torn up across the board. But what's truly remarkable isn't just the ban itself, it's how badly Washington misread the situation. The Trump administration thought they had crafted the perfect strategy. They would allow Nvidia to sell specially designed chips to China, but with a catch: 15% of every sale would go straight to the U.S. Treasury. It seemed like a foolproof plan. China would get the advanced processors it needed, American companies would rake in profits, and Washington would skim a healthy share off the top. The administration fundamentally misunderstood China's determination to break free from U.S. technological control, says Dr. Sarah Chen, a leading semiconductor industry analyst. They thought Beijing would accept a subordinate position in the global tech hierarchy. That miscalculation is now costing American companies dearly. Instead of rushing to buy these approved chips, China didn't just decline. They slammed the door shut with such force that it rattled boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. Beijing's message was crystal clear: China is done playing by America's rules. The stakes are staggering. For companies like Qualcomm, China represents a staggering 64% of total revenue. Nvidia stood to earn an estimated $15 billion from smooth sales to Chinese buyers, money that's now likely lost forever. Even Apple, America's most valuable company, depends on China for nearly 1/5 of its global revenue. But this crisis didn't appear overnight. It's the direct result of years of U.S. policies that, ironically, accelerated the very outcome Washington was trying to prevent. For over a decade, American strategy focused on keeping China away from cutting-edge semiconductor technology. Export restrictions, sales bans, and limits on manufacturing equipment were all meant to slow China's technological progress. What Washington didn't count on was China's response. Instead of accepting these restrictions, Beijing poured billions into developing its own chip industry. Entire industrial parks sprouted up dedicated to semiconductor research and production. Universities dramatically expanded their engineering programs, training thousands of specialists in chip design and manufacturing. The Trump administration's trade war only added fuel to the fire. As tariffs and sanctions piled up, China treated independence from American technology as a national mission. Investment in domestic alternatives skyrocketed. What was once a long-term ambition became an urgent priority. The results shocked even seasoned industry observers. Gaps that analysts said would take a decade to close were narrowed in just 4 or 5 years. Chinese company DeepSeek unveiled AI systems that could compete head-to-head with Western platforms. SMIC, China's leading chip manufacturer, announced plans to double its production of advanced 7-nanometer processors. Now Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, a Wall Street veteran known for his market insight, finds himself at the center of this storm. Sources say he's deeply concerned about the economic fallout. Without Chinese buyers, America's semiconductor industry faces a profound crisis. It's not just about lost sales. It's about losing the economies of scale that make cutting-edge research and development possible. The timing couldn't be worse for the U.S. economy. Already struggling with inflation, debt, and political uncertainty, losing its biggest tech customer threatens to upset an already precarious balance. Some analysts warn this could mark the beginning of the end for America's long-standing dominance in semiconductor technology, but the implications go far beyond just chips. Semiconductors are the foundation of modern technology.